So listen to this. I have never seen any player have a more toxic love-hate relationship with football than Samir Nasri. This guy was so obsessed with the sport that reporters would often ask for his thoughts on other teams' tactics because he'd know absolutely everything about everyone. Not to mention, of course, that he was one of the greatest contenders for the title of the next Zidane, a player so talented that if you just squinted your eyes at times, you could swear you were watching Messi. He had a more successful career than 99.9% of footballers, yet this guy always seemed to be on the edge of quitting the sport, just waiting for the day he could finally retire. He couldn't shut his mouth to save his own life. He was making enemies everywhere he went, always involved in some drama, and he wasn't happy until he became the most hated man in London, until his career went up in a blaze as eventually his ultimate scandal finally proved too much for his talent to overshadow. If there's any doubt this man was done with football years before he hung up his boots, just look at the state he was in only a month after announcing his retirement. Yeah. Look, first of all, most people don't realize how big this guy was in France. At the age of 9, he was already known all across Marseille as the second coming of Zidane. I mean, come on. The kid grew up in the same side of town as him, and he was also a non-practicing Muslim of Algerian descent. The Marseille scouts did not even think twice before coming down for a look. They were so eager to get him in, they flew him out to a tournament in Italy before he even signed for their academy, and had to damn near fight the AC Milan coaches who kept insisting that he must stay here, you must leave him with us. Regardless, he did not, and at 16 he was lining up beside Ben Arfa and Benzema for what became known as the 87 generation, and again, you just don't get it. These kids had the whole country believing they were headed towards an era of unprecedented domination, going into the under-17 Euros and steamrolling all opposition, with Nasri scoring in the semis against Portugal and then the winner in the final from 30 yards out against a Spanish side that included the likes of Piqué and Fabregas, meaning that a month later, once the first team crashed out of the Euros in the first round of the knockout stage, everyone in the country turned their backs on them and embraced those kids as their new heroes. Still only 16, Nasri was being followed by Chelsea, Liverpool, Newcastle, and above all, Arsenal. The old Wenger, as per usual, was so obsessed with the newest, shiniest French talents that as Marseille squirmed around trying to get Nasri to put pen to paper, he still managed to snatch Flamini on a free deal from right under their noses, leading to a massive lawsuit. Regardless, with Marseille at least managing to get Nasri locked in, he made his debut for the club, coming in for Bruno Cherou, another one once named the next Zidane, and I'm guessing seeing the ghost of his own future must have scared him straight, because even with Marseille going through 6 managers in his first 3 seasons, his rise was incredible. By the end of that first year, he was already being dubbed the Little Prince of the Velodrome. By second, he was playing damn near every game, and by the third, he was hitting double digits for assists, getting called up to the French national team, and ultimately not just beating Ribéry and Cissé to the club's Player of the Year award with an astounding 62% of the votes, but being named the league's Young Player of the Year and getting that award handed to him by none other than Zinedine Zidane. After that, there was no stopping the comparisons. All fans were convinced they had just witnessed the passing of the torch, and man, the next season only made it worse. Ribéry left for Bayern, and new manager Eric Guéret put Nasri at the center of Marseille's attack, but some say it was a case of viral meningitis that changed them forever. As one newspaper wrote, hooked up to a morphine drip, bedridden for 12 days, Nasri came to a conclusion. Rather than a stream of visitors that had been only a trickle, it opened his eyes to the superficiality of so many relationships in football. So, at 20 years old, that resentment for the sport finally began to grow, and the results were devastating. If before you could argue Nasri was all aesthetics and no end product, now the kid was putting down 17 goal contributions in 22 matches, topping the assist charts and making sure Marseille played Champions League football for 2 years in a row for the first time since they had outright won the whole thing. This kid had newspapers asking for the hideous hideous Coca-Cola ad that replaced the dance poster to be torn down to put Nasri in it instead, in a giant photo facing the sea because he deserves it. The whole city had fallen in love with him, and they only fell even harder when, amongst transfer speculations, he renewed his contract so they could extort even more money from whichever top club ended up taking him. However, that would be the last football club to ever love him. In what was easily the most predictable move of all time, Wenger slapped 16 million euros on the table to get Nasri to London, but the problem was that he was so quick, he got it all done before the Euros, and once there, though Nasri barely took part in a campaign that made 2004 look excellent in comparison, he did manage to pick a fight with one of the national team veterans, none other than William Gallas, the captain of Arsenal. Yeah, Nasri arrived at the club to all the fanfare imaginable, scoring only 4 minutes into his debut and soon smacking in 2 screamers with Ronaldo's United, as Wenger promised him he had everything it takes to be the best player in the world, only for Gallas to then release a book in which he blasted an unnamed player who was more than obviously Nasri, calling him an insolent brat, before going on a whole tirade about how, while Henry was out injured, he took his place on a national team bus and refused to move after being told where he was seated, which, yes, is a petty enough argument that, given the rumors that Gallas was already in non-speaking terms with at least 5 of his teammates, Wenger ended up stripping him of his captaincy, eventually leading to his departure to rivals Tottenham, after which Nasri made sure to spice up the drama even more by refusing to shake his hand. But don't get it wrong, soon enough there would be leaks from within the Arsenal staff that indeed Nasri had no respect for the team's hierarchy, and though his style on the pitch quickly made him a fan favorite, especially amongst the younger fans. After that good start, he was repeatedly outshunned by Fabregas and Van Persie, only getting 1 goal contribution from January onwards. And that was before his second season started, not only with the club being forced to send him into a detox program overseas in order to get him to shed some extra pounds, as claims went around that Samir is a great footballer but hardly an athlete, but with Nasri breaking his leg while still in pre-season and going out for over 3 months, missing out on 31 games between club and country. Though, of course, right in the middle of what should have been his most forgettable season yet, he'd show up in a Champions League quarter-final and score what would likely have won the Puskás Award that year had it not been for Ronaldo's ungodly strike, getting all the newspapers to inflate his ego with comparisons with every legend from Maradona to even Stanley Matthews, just in time so that when he was left out of France's World Cup squad, he felt entitled enough that after watching their camp fall into absolute chaos, with the players going on strike mid-tournament, he had the nerve to call his teammates the laughingstock of world football and to sarcastically ask, "But I was the troublemaker, huh?" before outright admitting that I was happy when the manager lost his job. Though, yet again, in classic Nasri fashion and with some expert sports psychology from Wenger behind it all, of course, this was precisely what led him to yet another one of his best ever seasons, as he himself closed off his statements by admitting that, "I am not hungry now, I am starving." After being forced into surgery in the league's opening game, not only did Nasri surprise everyone by coming back after only a month, but by hitting 5 goal contributions in 3 games before September ended, then skipping only 1 match before doing it all again to make it 10 goal contributions in 7 matches, kicking Tottenham out of the League Cup and demolishing City 3-0 in the process, being named by the fans as the league's player of the month, though seemingly that wasn't enough for him, as he'd come back by dribbling the keeper against Tottenham, smacking in a volley against Villa, and absolutely destroying Fulham with 2 of the greatest Premier League goals of all time, this time around not settling for the fan-voted award, but taking the actual Premier League's Player of the Month award as well, except that all paled in comparison when the same French federation that had not called him up to the World Cup shocked everyone by handing him the French Player of the Year award. Yes, obviously he was helped by the fact that most of their star players had been pretty much disqualified after the World Cup strike, but just imagine how Nasri felt seeing all of his wild statements being validated by the very people he was attacking. Yeah, and as if he needed any help inflating his own ego, the fans then handed him a 3rd Player of the Month award in just 4 months. But honestly, even though eventually the French national team would go as far as making him the 2nd youngest to ever wear their captain's armband, after that final award, it almost seemed that fire yet in him was extinguished, like he was content, closing out things with 1 goal and no assists in the final 14 games of the season, losing the League Cup final, allowing Arsenal to slip from being within 2 points of the top to finishing 4th place, and ultimately getting nominated to both the PFA Player and Young Player of the Year awards, only to lose out on both to Gareth Bale. And eventually, it would all make sense. Over summer, it would come out that after Nasri's first Player of the Month award, he had asked for his contract to be renegotiated, demanding to get paid as much as Fabregas, to which Arsenal told him to wait until February, precisely the month in which his form dropped massively, as it claimed he felt disrespected at Arsenal let the month go by without approaching him, only coming forward in June, by which, in Nasri's own words, it was too late. The guy spent the whole summer on a campaign of self-promotion that frequently involved tearing down Arsenal, claiming that I already earn a huge wage. My priority is to feel the emotion of winning. With no titles, you can't be in the list for the Ballon d'Or. A statement that only made the fans hate him even more once he picked a €28 million move to Man City, who haven't won the league in 44 years, leading Wenger himself to claim that, frankly, you don't go to Man City to win titles. Players go to City because they play much better than Arsenal. And indeed, Nasri had just become the most well-paid French player of all time, so in a year where their own captain Fabregas left as well, boycotting training and offering to pay out of his own pocket to be let go, it was Nasri who was the target of the fans' hate, would label him a cancer Judas once he felt the need to claim the City fans were more passionate than Arsenal's, even getting into a whole feud with his ex-teammate Emmanuel Frimpong over a tweet, sending him threatening messages and eventually clashing on the pitch after Nasri had the indecency to tell him that he could buy him, leading Frimpong to hit back saying that even if you paid me $5 billion, I could not like Nasri. Though, to be fair, even if his season would be relatively disappointing, well, midway through it he was already telling the Arsenal fans to look at the table, and though not even his winner against Chelsea could save him from the scare of going into the final minutes of the season in 2nd place, well, then Aguero happened, and as Arsenal went trophyless again, Nasri's bet had paid off. As he'd say, I hope they are watching me now, collecting my Premier League medal. Regardless, things weren't all good. Not only were there rumors already that Mancini wanted him gone, but once called up for the Euros, despite opening the tournament with an equalizer against England and taking the man of the match, Nasri found a way to ruin his own moment, running towards the cameras telling the journalists to shut their mouths, and somehow making it all that much worse after their quarter-final defeat to Spain, completely crashing out and calling a journalist every bad word in the book, leaving the federation with no choice but to hand him a 3-match ban, though that was almost pointless, as the manager would refuse to even call him up after that, leading him to seriously consider international retirement at 25 years of age. On his 2nd season, Nasri would once again be painfully average, only really making news in December after he stepped out of the way to let Van Persie's shot in during the Manchester derby, soon leading Mancini to lose it after his man-of-the-match performance against Newcastle, claiming he would like to punch him for not playing that way every game. But, of course, I almost feel like a broken record. It was right then that Nasri popped off again. Pellegrini came in and God knows what clicked at this point, but by early December, he was already on 12 goal contributions, absurdly averaging 1 every 93 minutes. He had become such a key element of that City squad that when he tore the ligaments of his knee in January, the papers were writing that their title hopes were at stake, as he was supposed to be out for 2 months, and yet, again, he miraculously recovered in a matter of weeks, scoring against Chelsea in his first match back, then scoring and taking the man of the match in the final of the League Cup just weeks later, eventually assisting Edin Dzeko for the goal that put them at the top with 2 games left, as well as getting the opening goal in the game of the title. Nasri had 2 Premier League titles to his name in just 3 years, and now, with 22 goal contributions to his name, no one at Arsenal could claim he was just a cog in City's machine. However, this time, the valley that followed his high was one Nasri would never come back from. Regardless of all he had done, regardless of his recent call-ups over summer, this shot did not bring him to the World Cup, claiming it destabilized the whole team. So, after his girlfriend made sure to insult the manager repeatedly, Nasri finally announced his retirement, saying that, "If last year I couldn't make the French national team, I don't know what more I could do," and soon it would be clear that in reality that day he didn't just quit the national team, he quit football. The next season, it seemed suddenly any injury was enough to rule him out for a month, 118 days on the sidelines in total as the fans began mocking him, claiming he was fat. Yet, if there were still some moments that season, the next led him directly towards the fourth injury that left him out for 165 more days from October to April. And just like that, 2 years had flown by, Guardiola was taking over at the club, and he was not about to put it lightly, shipping him off the club as he claimed that Nasri is overweight and always injured, and though at first it almost seemed like it'd be a pleasant surprise at Sevilla, then all hell broke loose. By December, out in LA, Nasri ended up at one of those hangover therapy clinics, leading to two major events. First, his girlfriend becoming paranoid that he cheated on her with a nurse, hijacking his Twitter account and posting a bunch of embarrassing tweets, and somehow even worse, the World Doping Agency investigating the situation, finding out he got injected with illegal amounts of a given substance, leading Sevilla to desperately ask for an exemption, still hoping to secure his permanent transfer, only to realize it was all hopeless, passing the hot potato to Antalyaspor, would be terminating his contract just 8 games later when the ban finally hit, keeping him away from the sport for 6 months. Still, once a free man, Pellegrini gave him the chance to join him at West Ham on the condition that he'd lose 11 pounds, but that lasted even fewer games, and once Vincent Kompany, another familiar face, offered him what was way beyond a second chance at Anderlecht, he struggled for fitness long enough that before he'd managed to get fit, his own sporting director admitted that, if we had to do it again, would we have signed Nasri? No. And then, well, then the pandemic hit, football stopped, and a year later, he finally admitted it was over. He had only played more than 13 games in a season once since his 27th birthday.